Do you know the 14 traits of successful chiropractors? We've interviewed some of the top chiropractors in the industry and have identified the common traits that they all share. Jump on over to www.chirobusinessmojo.com to get your free report today.
Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day.
Yes, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Hello, and thank you so much for spending some of your time with me. Well, I gotta tell you, a strange thing has started happening around my house. My wife will walk around behind me sometimes and say, "Yes, I am Dr. Richard Day, and this is me taking out the garbage," or some mundane task. So just a gentle reminder to let you know that never get too full of yourself. There will always be someone there to sort of bring you down, and a lot of times it's those who are closest to you. But I gotta tell you, it is all in good fun, and I can't help but get into my DJ voice mode when I get a microphone in front of me. I blame years of being in a band and playing my fair share of weddings and corporate events. You just have to come at it with some excitement, and I'm excited about what I do here, and I'm excited about the message I'm bringing to you every day. And speaking of excitement, I am absolutely thrilled about my guest today. Dr. Janice Hughes is a leader, a teacher, an author, and a coach to thousands of professionals. Her unique style of leadership has represented an extraordinary value asset to those lives she has touched. Over the course of her career, she's been a senior coach and consultant to the Master Circle, a director of practice leadership at Palmer College of Chiropractic, vice president of the Ontario Chiropractic Association. She's also provided personal and professional coaching services for WowCoach. She's authored multiple books and audio presentations on values, attraction and prosperity, and practice applications of universal laws. As a scientist, author, international lecturer, and mega-volume practitioner, Dr. Janice Hughes has been one of the top coaches in chiropractic for over a decade, leading the prestigious Winner's Circle and coaching some of the most significant practices in our profession. Welcome, Dr. Janice Hughes.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, thanks so much for checking in with us, and I invite you to jump in and help fill in any gaps I may have glossed over in your bio.
Sure. Actually, you talked a lot about sort of the history and some of the things I've done. Currently, I think it's just really important for people to know that I'm not still in private practice. And, what I focus on now are a lot of other different projects, even than, say, one-on-one coaching. Like I go down and I work with some of the students at Life University, and I do that, several times a year just to really give back to them and help them focus on success. And then now at this stage of my career, I'm really focused with a big project on autism. So at some other point when we're not talking success and coaching and things, I'd even be happy to have a conversation about that.
I'd love to do that. I've got a son that's on the autistic spectrum. I guess that is. And so I'd love to chat with you more about that because I think that research is fascinating.
It is.
Well, you have achieved great heights in the chiropractic profession, and we all graduate with that same piece of paper, but we all head different directions, it seems, and we have various levels of success. Please share with us some of the high points you've had in your career along the way.
Well, I think a key thing that I can now, being a little bit older in the profession, sort of look back, like, isn't it always interesting? They always say, hindsight's 20/20. That what I feel my real success was literally allowing myself multiple transitions. And what I mean by that is just how I mentioned, I left private practice, and, there's a lot of learning and growth that has to go along with that, especially because I then wanted to do other projects and things. And my personality, it was just really smart and wise for me then to sell my practice. I've had multiple transitions since then, but one of the, I'll call it words or key pieces, if I can say, for myself, and it's based on my mentors and my own coaches and people around me, I was really able to focus a lot on my values. And values, the clearer you get on them, it's like they're your fingerprint. And, I got clearer and clearer to specialize and focused on the things that mattered the most to me. So even one thing, a lot of people said there was a point where I was speaking all over and teaching all over in the profession. And a lot of people wondered why I was suddenly stopping or changing that. And again, it was another transition for me. And that transition came because at that point I traveled and I was speaking and I was coaching. And one of the things that I found is I was getting a little frazzled on the home front. And my kids, I have 3 sons, fabulous husband. And it just came to a point where it's like I recognized I needed to practice what I preached. And so the leaving or the not speaking as much, it's not like I went away. I haven't altered anything. If anything, it was me just putting more priority one year and saying, what are my top 2 or 3 goals? And it suddenly became my kids and the phases and ages that they were at. So, again, you can see it's a blend for me. I think that, my greatest high points or success has been clarity of my values and then allowing myself to create different transitions in my career.
So when it comes to these transitions you have, I certainly understand the one driven by family, but had you planned on practicing for a short period of time and then branching out, or did you sort of ride a wave of things that happened in your life and then, follow those to where their logical end was?
That's a great question because it was absolutely just following a wave. Before I got into chiropractic, I come from a very much more medical oriented background. I have a master's degree in somatic cell genetics and, so that more traditional medical and did the 180 into chiropractic. And so had no intentions of only practicing for 14 or 15 years. It was like, that's what I was really good at. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's not, oh, wow, I left because something wasn't working. You're exactly right. I love those words. I followed the wave, that as I did my own personal growth and development and learning, those things and blending that with some of my natural communication skills, it just very quickly became that I was myself benefiting from coaching and then started studying and being trained as a coach. And then how could I utilize that? And, I'm very fortunate that I have some really dear friends and mentors in the profession, that really challenged me, through some of the stages, not trying to be jack of all trades, and master of none, to recognize I'd been a masterful practitioner. And then how could I take those same focus and emphasis on mastery into coaching and speaking and these other things?
Well, I'm always interested in that because, like I said, our paths are so varied. And, some people have a plan from day one and others sort of see where it takes them and they never know what's around the corner. So it's exciting to look at everything you've done in your career and hear that wasn't part of a grand plan. It just sort of happened.
Yeah, and it's interesting. John DeMartini was a fabulous mentor of mine, really young and early in my career. And, he really taught us all obviously about, our purpose and a big vision. And I used to tease because some people out there may be in the same boat I was where, John would talk about his vision for 10 and 20 and 30 years down the road. And I'd think, wow, I kind of have this idea or scheme for the end of the year, but I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to eat for dinner next week. And, so for me, it wasn't that I didn't have a bigger vision. It just wasn't as crystal clear as some of those fabulous mentors. And, but as I allowed myself to still live on purpose and really focus on these things that we call success principles, it's like then that allowed me to ride that wave that you're describing, but in a really like soulful and purpose-driven way.
Well, you touched on what you're involved in now in terms of autism, but what else is exciting you today about what you're involved in today? Well,
I just think that it's so key that we talk to more and more chiropractors about success, life success, but also business success. And it's interesting because you're talking about that chiro business mojo. And, I think that all too often, a lot of chiropractors forget or have been led down a path that, well, it's not about business, be a fabulous adjuster and all else follows. And personally, what I find is that there's just not enough emphasis on business, success in the business. It is the business of chiropractic. And I'm incredibly philosophical. Please know that for me, that's a given, but then how do you blend that with business and business rules and success? And so part of why I go back to life, and I'm sure it's overwhelming for them, because they're at a stage it's, well, how do I pass my boards? But I'm hopeful that in instilling a little bit about business and finances, that it helps young practitioners get a footing sooner. And then one of the things I've learned through our autism project, my involvement, we're a biotech company, dealing with phase 3 clinical trials in autism, and we're private. And so one key role of mine over the last 7 or 8 years has been to basically raise our funds for all the research and work that we do. And the shocking part for me was that I had this fabulous network within chiropractic, and most chiropractors could not afford to invest in us, even in the early stages, let alone now that we're much more developed. But it's interesting, so my chiropractic love, the philosophical people I was around, a lot of them, it's a blend of the finances and even their success was about building this great life, and yet some of them were building a lifestyle. And, so there's a lot of misconceptions around this business piece. And so that was a real wake up for me, and one of the key pieces that I'm really passionate about now in the profession is I'd like to bring more of that financial leadership, financial, literacy from a values-based into chiropractic.
I love where you're going with that because you and I are very much on the same page. That's the purpose of this podcast, is to really touch on some of the business side of things that are missing out there. I had a conversation with my wife just the other day, and I said, wouldn't it be great if there was a little bubble that automatically popped up after the word, let's say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an artist. Oh, you want to be in the art business? Or whatever it is, because there are so many things where we don't often think of them that there is a business to it unless you just want to do it for fun. And chiropractic is no different. If you want to practice for free, you can, but if you want to feed your family and earn a living, then that's another hat you're going to wear. And that's a separate and distinct discipline from being an adjuster or a chiropractor. So
yeah, and I think that both hands go together. I call it the business hand and the adjusting, philosophical, principled hand. And one of the things I know my era, a lot of people, would be, well, if someone's doing too well, there must be something shady going on. And, it's like, wait a minute, how can we embrace? And I used to say to a lot of the docs that I would, coach when I was part of the master circle, may you do so well and so well financially that you can give back, that you give to others. And a lot of young practitioners even come out, one of those challenges is when you do set up your practice, say in an area, that you grew up, I always say to them, it's okay. I would even recognize there's some family and close friends, that you would like to, let's call it gift your care to them. Yet what I would do is I would pull them all in for a group, basically like mini report at the very beginning of my practice. And I would talk to them and I'd have them understand chiropractic. Then I would say to them, my gift to you is that I would love to look after your nervous system. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do is have you sign an agreement with me about that. So for the exchange of your care, and I would list things out like that they multiple schedule their appointments, that if they have to miss or change, that's a 24-hour notice, that they tell others, that they bring other people, that they help me come up with wonderful places to give talks and share my knowledge.
These are all great ideas. I think that maybe that approach isn't used widely enough. I know especially when someone's first starting a practice, there are so many things to do that maybe working out the details on those would be a good idea, because you definitely are going to see your family and friends, and those folks are going to be your first patients.
That's right. And, so instead of also all of us saying, oh, never give away your care, if you have a relationship with someone that you would love to gift them, I don't even call it giveaway, I call it gift them, then I would put them on requirements to do that.
Well, let's talk. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, let's talk for a moment about the chiropractic profession. It's undergone a lot of change here recently with insurance and Obamacare and things like that. Let's say Dr. Janice Hughes has access to a time machine and she sets the controls and pops out 10 years from now. Where do you think, when you look around, what is the state of chiropractic 10 years from now?
If we embrace the opportunities and the business opportunities in front of us, the future is so bright. Meaning that we have this unbelievable service commodity. More and more people are turning to that. If you look at physicians' practices alone, there's a lot of practitioners that have gone into, say, a small group where you pay a fee for access into their network, and their focus is, keeping you healthy, keeping you well. There's all these trends in healthcare that to me are just showing this idea of how do you take charge and responsibility, for your health, for your wellness? What does that look like? How do we define that? And us being a really critical part of that conversation.
Well, let's drill down into the specifics of running a practice. And we touched on this a little bit, but, you've coached a lot of folks out there. I'm sure that you see a lot of trends. What are some of the common traits you've seen and the folks that are struggling?
Again, a really good question, because, we're obviously all different and unique, and yet trends is a key word you're describing. And one of the pieces, I'll call it, is, that sense of being alone, or, a lot of struggling practitioners, it's almost like they come out of school and they've got those excellent skills, and yet you open up your doors or you put your shingle up and, people aren't just naturally beating that door down. And so I find what tends to happen is sometimes instead of turning outward, they become very insulated, very alone, almost some shame in that. I had all this success in school, and what do you mean I can't figure this out? Then unfortunately, I find that some of the young practitioners that do reach out for help, get doors or phones slammed down in their ear. And I can even give that example. My husband and I both are chiropractors and had two different practices up in Canada. And we used to tease that we could either have a marriage or we could have a practice together, just based on our personalities. And so as we were leaving and came down to the U.S., we spent a year in Iowa where I was doing some work with Dr. Riekman at Palmer. But then as we came out here to Colorado, one of the things for me, there was a lot of chiropractors out here, and I wasn't going to go into private practice, but my husband was again. And so I said, well, let's call up a couple of these great chiropractors. And shocking, because now remember that my husband at that point had been in practice just about 20 years. And when he called the chiropractor's practice, the CA on the phone, the assistant, was basically saying, no, the doctor's not available to speak with you. We have enough chiropractors in town, actually, and we're definitely not looking for anyone to join our practice. Please don't bother calling back. Now, that was us all these years in practice. Now, how is that for a young practitioner, though? Because then someone who finally did reach out for some help or support or thinks that they're going to join a network in the town they're in, sometimes those doors are slammed in their face. So I think one of the biggest challenges or trends, is where and how to find like-minded people. And I'm going to encourage any young doc or anybody, with any of that sense of aloneness or I'm supposed to figure this out, just keep asking. Ask until you find those very open people, because they're there, and that's the beauty of the networks I've been involved with and the different people I've coached over the years. And some of them now go on and have their own coaching, groups. But there are just a lot of people that are willing to say, yeah, how can I help you? And I give that example that, I always tease, I succeeded in spite of myself. Because I came out of school and, the same thing. Wow, I thought I had it figured out. And, luckily for me, I was a little more extroverted, and I opened my mouth and I talked and, connected with, companies and people in the community. But I'll tell you that the advantage of that and my personality was I kept looking for great people. And miraculously, because of my mindset, I actually found them. I found other practitioners that have been in practice for 5 or 10 or 20 years, or people that coached and mentored. And, there are a lot of great people out there. So I think, really that encouragement, the coach in me always says, what's your action step? It's to ask, reach out. I'll make sure that anybody listening, I'll make sure you have my email, and contact information, because for me, it's all about how do we create more success with the young people and or anyone out there feeling like that they are alone and struggling.
Well, you said a word that comes up a lot, and that is mindset. When it comes to the traits common among the successful chiropractors, would you say it's mindset primarily?
I think it's definitely mindset blended with tenacity. Mindset and willing to work on it, because we all have that negative self-talk. We all have that little monkey sitting on our shoulder, going, no, really? Who do you think you are? Oh, you can't do that. Or no way are you going to succeed with that. The distinction is that we all have it. The successful people just recognize, I'm going to go about doing this anyway, and there's the power of affirmations. The one tool that I can say to everybody listening, I think our lives change when we really embrace affirmations. And I mean affirmations like in the moment, short, sweet, even when those negative thoughts are hitting, it could be saying to yourself, well, who the heck taught me that? I don't choose to listen to that right now. That thought can hit tomorrow, but right now, here's what I'm going to focus on. And that kind of in the moment affirmations, changing your habits, changing your patterns, that's a tool, because I see that for successful people, they've had those same self-doubts or that same negative self-talk. They start to figure out the simple action steps to control it. And then they just blend with that, some people listening might call it the chutzpah, the tenacity, the willingness to take action. And so I think it's the two. I think if we were all really, really super evolved beings, I think we could be like a monk and sit up on the mountaintop and meditate and have that level of control of the mind. But I have yet in my own life, or for many of us, to see us at that level. So for me, it's how do we tap into that and work on that mindset and structure and discipline around it? And then how do we blend it with action steps? And, the question I'm going to have anybody listening write down is the question that you ask yourself, what is my next simplest action step? Because I think why a lot of us avoid some of that action is we always think about the real big stuff. In practice, well, I need a better location, or I need to renovate the whole building. It's looking a little tired in my practice. I mean, those are really, really, really big things, versus what's my simplest step today? Can I pick up the phone? Can I do one thing? Can I write an affirmation for myself? Can I read a simple, great book? Who can I call? So my favorite is, what is the next simplest action step that I can take?
That is it for part 1 of our interview with Dr. Janice Hughes. Make sure you check out tomorrow's podcast for part 2.
Thanks for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast at www.chirobusinessmojo.com.